Hello everybody and welcome to the session number 4, which is going to be about the literature review. We are going to discuss how we can prepare the literature review and what are the purposes of the literature review for this session. So the intended learning outcomes for this session is that the students, after finishing this session, they should be able to define the literature review and also discuss the purposes of literature review and understand why we need the literature review in research, and also explain the literature review process, which is very important, so how he can or how she can, anybody, the researcher or students can build a very solid, very cohesive and coherent literature review through a process. And also the students should be able to recognize the characteristics of effective literature review. What is the a good literature review and what are the characteristics of this type of literature review? And also the students should be able to organize literature review in research projects. The students also should be able to prepare the references using the APA style. So this is the style that is very, very popular in business administration. So students must take the citation and also prepare the references using this style. The content of this session is defining the literature review, purpose of literature review process, and characteristics of effective literature review, and organization of literature review, and referencing. So at the beginning, we need to understand what is literature review. So literature review is reading the works of others, which can pave the way for better research and help in identifying the reference of the research. So it is reviewing all the previous work in order to identify the relevant of the research and for many purposes. Talking about the purposes of literature review, we have different types of purposes or different purposes for literature review. The first purpose of literature review is to limit the problem area. So we need to read all the previous work in the same area. If I'm doing, for example, a research about job performance, so I need to read all the previous work in order to limit the problem area and find out the research gaps. The second purpose of the literature review is to define the problem. So to state the problem and define the problem, write any background about the problem, I need to review all the literature review, which is going to be of two components, reviewing the theoretical background and also the previous studies in the same area. The third purpose of literature review, we need to do literature review to search for new approaches. So we need to read the approaches and the method and find out the methodologies used in the same area and for the same or for similar topics or research problems in order to find out new approaches. Then one of the purposes of literature review is also to recommend suitable methods. So this is to save time for the researcher. Just to read the previous research papers for research problems equivalent to the problem the researcher is doing, so he can get or she can get the experience about the suitable methods he is going or she is going to use. Another purpose for literature review is to sample current opinions. Reading the literature review in a way that we come up with different opinions, we come up with patterns and then connect these patterns all together and also come up with our opinion as researchers or our sampling or sample opinions for the research area. To guide for clear contribution, the researcher cannot tell about the contribution unless he compare between the previous studies and previous contributions and what the researcher is going to do. So just to differentiate between what is going to be done by the researcher and what has been contributed before, so the researcher can prove that the contribution is there, both the theoretical contribution and the practical contribution. The last one is to avoid unnecessary repetition. We all know that to do research, good research, that means this research must add something new, something novel. That means this research is going to be with an added value. If there is no added value in any paperwork or research work, that means it is not worthwhile research. So to avoid the unnecessary repetition, which is going to be a waste of time, you need to review all the previous studies and come up with a research gap to be done by you. The literature review process is going to be followed or divided in 4 steps. The first step is search the existing literature in your research area of interest. The second, review the literature review obtained. The third, develop the theoretical framework. And the last one is going to be the writing up of the literature review. Mistakenly, a lot of researchers they think that the literature review is only writing up the previous studies. This is not right, as the literature review is reading with critiques, analyzing all the previous work, then reviewing and then develop the theoretical framework that you are going to do, and the last step is going to be the writing up of the literature review. So the first step, which is searching for sources of literature, as we know, researchers have to read previous studies from published materials, published journals, international journals, and from previous work, whether it is dissertation, thesis, international articles, international journals, whatever. Whatever sources or resources got is going to be reviewed, but we most of the time recommend that the researcher must depend on research papers, published research papers mostly, as it is a research work, and then depend on dissertation, thesis, and then books and conferences. A lot of sources for literature review the researcher can follow. Google Scholar, for example, or a lot of research indices. The indices of journals like Emerald, Elsevier, and Science Direct also is one of the best indices. All these indices are good sources for the literature review, as you can find the most recent work in the same area anytime, and it is online. Going to the library, finding out data from secondary data, from books, from articles of the published journals, from reports, all these can be a source for the literature review. The second step, as we said, it is review the literature. When we say review the literature, as I said, it doesn't mean the writing up. The writing up is the last step. So this step is reading with the critiques in mind. Read all the previous related work. Whatever is related to your research problem needs to be reviewed critically in order to synthesize your own ideas and synthesize your own literature review and your research work. So you read with critiques in mind and note the theories used. It's very important to understand the theories used for any of the research problems you are going to do the research about. So if I'm going to do research about organizational commitment, that means I need to review all the theories and all the models related to this variable and understand in depth what does it mean and what is related to organizational commitment, whatever model and theory, and how people defined it, and how they explained and conceptualized this variable. The second is note the relevancy to your study. So I read the previous work and find out connections between the study the study we are the current study we are doing research about and the previous research. So relevancy differences must be also read critically. So find differences of opinion among researchers. A lot of research gaps comes from reading previous work and finding out the irregularities and differences and deficiencies between previous research papers. Then the last one is examine the gaps that exist in the body of knowledge. So this is how we review the literature. So the structure of review article, a lot of review article done by some researchers, and the structure of it is read and understand the abstract, which is the first step, then read and understand the introduction, and go and read the methodology section, then read the results section, and at the end read and understand the discussion section. So this is an ideal review article components. Then the process of reviewing, as explained, includes researching the literature first, and then sorting and prioritizing the retrieved literature. So I read the beginning abstracts and recommendations, and then sort all the literature reviewed, and then prioritize which of these research papers are related to my work and which is not, which is fully related to the work and which with only small relationship. Then analytical reading of papers. That means you will not just read ordinary reading, which is just descriptive reading. You need to analyze what you have, what you are reading, so you can come up with opinions. Evaluative reading of papers is very important also. You read and evaluate and find out some problems, find out the value of the research papers you are reading, and compare between studies. You compare between all the studies you are reviewing, find out differences and similarities, and then organize the content and writing the review. So the third step when you review the literature is the development of the framework. As we know, we read in order to find out the gaps, and also in order to develop the model, the research model of the research. So as you start reading the literature, you will soon discover that the problem you wish to investigate has its root in a number of theories that have been developed from different perspectives. So you need to understand the different perspectives of the theories, because as we know, theories can be looked from different angles or from different perspectives. So you need to develop a framework from the previous work. Try to develop your framework and compare to what an existing or find generic framework, and then use it as point of reference. So find out the previous work, find out how they have developed the frameworks and theories, and then you develop your own model dependent on the previous theories and previous models. To also sample the literature review and to understand or to do the literature review, you need to understand three important terminologies, which is theory, concepts, and proposition. The theory is a set of explanatory concepts, and it is about variables and the relationship between the variable. So if I am doing a research, and this research is going to be the relationship between job satisfaction or the effect or the impact of job satisfaction and job performance. So this is the IV and this is the DV, the independent variable and the dependent variable. This is the model I am going to develop. The relationship between these variables is going to be the theory, what we call the theory. The second one is the concept. The concept is mostly the variable itself, an operationalized variable, the variable that can be operationalized so in a way that it can be measured, so it can contribute to this model or to this theory. The proposition is what we call the hypothesis, which is a defined statement concerning the relationship among variables. So here we can hypothesize that there is a significant impact of job satisfaction on the job performance if it's an impact. The writing up, as I said, is the last one, the last step in which we describe and do comparison and evaluate findings based on assumptions of research, theories related to the area of study, the hypothesis and research design applied, variable selected, and potential future work speculated by researchers. So I write the literature review and taken into consideration the assumptions, the theories, the hypothesis, the research design applied, variables, whatever. Mostly, I arrange or organize it by thematic. So I start with studies about DV, then studies about IVs, then studies that can be depicting the relationship between the IVs and the DV. So it can be organized this way. When we work, we need to keep the work in working in ethics. That means don't, as a researcher, do not practice the plagiarism, which is stealing the other's work and pretending that it's your work. So plagiarism is a taboo in research. So you can get the help of a lot of studies in the literature review, but you have to cite and mention the owners of these ideas, the authors of these ideas, which is copyright, preserving the copyright. So plagiarism is a taboo in research, and ethically we have to stick to the ethical issues, and sometimes we paraphrase ideas. Even if you paraphrase ideas, you still need to write the citation. It's very important to write the citation, even if it is paraphrasing. The characteristics of effective literature review. We need to know what is the effective literature review. The effective literature review must outline important research trend. So go for the new gaps, the new trends the development of the area you are doing research on. Assessing the strengths and weaknesses of existing research. This is also very important. You have to assess the strengths and weaknesses, evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the existing research. You are, as we said previously, you are reading with critiques, so analyzing and criticize in order to synthesize new ideas. Identifying potential gaps of in knowledge. So the effective literature review is the literature review which conclude with or come up with gaps in knowledge that is needs to be filled by you. So this gap, for example, is an area nobody has done research in, so you are going to be doing this research, and it is related to what we call the contribution of the researcher. Establishing a need for current and future research projects is also part or characteristics of the literature review. We organize, as we said, the literature review in different ways. Of course, a general organization looks like a funnel, which is starting from general to specific. So here is broader topics, start with general, and then here is specific, which is going to be the research area, the research problem you are doing research on. Subtopics second, and then studies like yours. So you organize from the general topics, then the subtopics, then studies like yours. So there are three methodologies of organizing the literature review. The first one is chronological, from old to recent. So I start with the old research papers first, and then I come up until I reach the recent one. This is very good method in order to find out or identify the research gap. So the research is like a building. When you start from the old till recent, you can show what you are going to add. The second one is thematic. So I can use both thematic and chronological all together. Thematic is organizing according to the themes, which is the variables. So as I said, I start about the DV, studies related to the DV, studies related to the IVs, and then studies that can connect the independent variables and dependent variable. The third one is methodologically. This is used sometimes to organize the studies according to the method used. So quantitative research, for example, is classified as one section, and another section is qualitative. To make links between studies, there are a lot of links. This is something related to the language and how to write and how to make the writing cohesive and coherent. So when you review and with the critiques, you need to talk about agreements, disagreements. So similarly, author B points blah blah blah, likewise, and disagreement like however, on the other hand, conversely, and nevertheless. So this is also can help the researcher to write a very cohesive research or literature review which is consistent. Sometimes the researchers needs a way to archive the studies, so he can come back to them very easily, because the researcher will have many studies when he reviews the literature. Sometimes some of the researchers read 60, 70, 80 research papers, 90 research papers. So from time to time he needs to come back to some of them. So it is easy for the researcher to summarize the research, the previous studies in a table summary. So whenever he has some problems or he needs to go back, he can have the table like a guidance. So the table the summary table is going to be a guidance for the researcher, and that can make the literature review easy. So it is useful to prepare. Such a table provides a quick overview that allows the reviewer to make sense of a literature mass information. The table could include columns with headings such as author, types of study, sample, design, data collection approach, and the key findings. These are the main or the key information needed by the reviewer of the literature. Then the researcher, while writing, he needs to follow a citation style. We mostly in business administration follow the EPA, the American Psychological Association style in citation, in which we need to cite inside the text, and also we collect all the references at the end of the research work. So inside the text, when we follow EPA, we have to write the family name of the author and the date, and then while we mention some ideas related to this type or related to the review of the literature of your research problem. To follow that, or to do so, when you mention the author of that idea or that research at the beginning of any paragraph or the beginning of writing, so you need to mention the family name of the researcher, and then between brackets you write the date. Then you can paraphrase the idea. You can say stated that blah blah blah. When you write the author at the end of the paragraph or the end of the any sentence, you need to put them both, the family name of the author, then comma, then the date of publishment between brackets at the end. So when you mention it at the beginning, family name, then the date. When you mention it at the end, family name, comma, and then the date between brackets. If you are going to quote a quotation, which is a direct citation, that means you are not going to paraphrase. You are going to take the phrasing as it is. You put it as it is. In this case, you again, if it's at the beginning of the paragraph, mention the family name and then the date, and you put the quotation between quotation marks. So when you put the quotation marks, that means you didn't paraphrase the wordings. You just take and put the wordings as it is, and then you have to write the page number. Page number is very, very important when you put a direct citation or a quotation. Again, the same. If it's at the beginning, you write the family name, the date, and the page number at the end. And if it's at the end of the sentence, you put everything between brackets, the family name, the date, and then P, which stands for the page number, and the page number. If you are going to cite for a work done by many authors, so if it's two, you mention the family name of the first one and the family name of the first and the second one. If it's more than two, you write the family name of the first author, and then but it all means and others. But when you mention it at the beginning for the first time, you need to mention the family name of all the authors. Mention it once, and then whenever it occurs or you refer to the same work, you just write the family name of the first one and then it all, which means the others. The format, these are some examples for citing references. So this is the first one. If it's a book, so we talked at the beginning, when we prepare references, we have two things to do. The first one is write the reference at the beginning, inside the text, according to the EPA we have just explained, and whatever is put in the text, whatever is cited in the text, you need to summarize at the end of the research work, which is under references headings. So you prepare according to the EPA. If it's a book, you write the family name of the author. This is family name of the author, and then comma, and then the first letter of the first name. If there are two, again the family name of the second author, and then the first letter of the second author, and then the year, then the title of the book, and if it's a book, the title of the book must be underlined or italicized, and then edition, if not the first edition, then the city, the publisher, and the country. Sometimes you add it. So this is an example. Lashen CB 1997. The book title is Management on the World Wide Web, and it is italicized, then the city, Englewood Club, NG Presents Hall, which is the publisher. This is another example. So author, the same. Okay. So Colonel Wiley Snackers 1998, and the pleasure, the title of the book is A Pleasure Neutron, and the second edition, London, and then this is the publisher. If it's a journal, again we put the family name of the author, and then the first letter of the first name, and the second also, then the year, then the title of the article, then the title of the journal, and this must be italicized, the title of the journal and volume number, and then the issue number. So we write also the volume number and the issue number and the page numbers, starting this paper is starting from page X to, for example, page Z. So this is an example. Family name, first letter, date, the title of the paper, research paper or the article, and then the journal title, and it must be italicized, and then the volume number, the issue number, and the pages number. This is another example. If it's an electronic source, sometimes you need to put the home page address or the location and write retrieved from this website or that website, like this one. So the age retrieved from, and sometimes you put the date here of the retrievement or here retrieving. The writing process, you write the literature review at the beginning as a rough draft, then final draft, then edit again, and it is good if you find somebody else to do the editing so you can find what are the problems you are facing. So you show others as part of the editors, so have someone else looked at your literature review for clarity, flow, and completeness, so can they understand what you are trying to say, and does the organization make sense, and the completeness, are there areas left out, questions left unanswered, statements without citation. A good literature review must be focused, so you focus on only one research problem. Concise, don't write anything that is not related to your work. Logical, when you discuss and when you synthesize and when you criticize, you have to mention something logically. You write logically so people can understand it and find it logical. And develop, so the idea needs to be developed. As we said, we write from general to specific, starting with the wide the topic, the general topic, then subtopics, and then integrative. From the beginning till the end of the research work, it must be talking about one issue and connected and integrative and integrated, and current, that means related to the current issues and the problem. So, dear students, through this session we learned many things. These things are defining the literature review, discussing the purpose of literature review, the process of literature review, and the characteristics of effective literature review, and also the organization of literature review. And finally, we also talked and learned about the references using the API style. The assignment is going to be attached with this class in the LMS. We come to the end of this session, which was about the literature review. We have explained what is the literature review and what are the purposes of literature review. Why do we need literature review as researchers and as students? And also we have talked about the process of literature review, how we can build a good literature review, and also the characteristics of effective literature review. I hope also everybody has understand the organization of the literature review and also how they prepare references. And I hope everything is very clear to you, and you have all the knowledge and skills needed for preparing the literature review. See you in the next session, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you.